And I'd like to invite everyone who's interested, and I think everyone should be interested, for the next session to stay if you have time. Michal Schrolowitz will be giving us a presentation about doing good and why we like to do good. So that will lighten the mood a bit, perhaps, after being occupied by these serious issues. So thank you all for the last session, and let's move on to the next session.
Thank you so much. I do want to say, and I posted it in the chat, and Emily and I talked 2 days ago after my other session, that following Max Bazerman in a research talk is like dancing on stage after Beyonce. It is really intimidating. So I'm just really grateful for the people that are here. I'm really grateful I got to hear Max Bazerman, but yeah, that's not an act I'd normally want to follow because he's a legend, but I'm going to try to make it worthwhile for the people who are here. And it is I think, oops, wait, I'm in the wrong, sorry, you wouldn't know that I'm constantly on Zoom based on this slideshow. I'm going to get in the right modality. So it is in a way a more lighthearted topic, though I think charitable giving is important. It certainly doesn't have the same weight. But I'm going to actually give a pretty long talk because it's 2 talks combined. And so if, after the first one, you're like, enough, you can leave. But it's actually going to be both about how charitable giving is like eating ice cream and how charitable giving is not like eating ice cream. And you might think, well, there's a million ways charitable giving is not like eating ice cream, but I'm going to come up with some things that are maybe not so obvious. How our endowment to a charitable donation might be even stronger than our endowment to possessions and things that we keep for ourselves. But I'm going to start out with ice cream because who doesn't love ice cream? Some people don't, I realize, but it works. It's also like eating chocolate. So for those of you who you don't like ice cream, but you like chocolate, that should work as well. And again, I'm apologizing for the lighting. I am not actually yellow. There's some weird thing going on where I'm staying. And I'm also in an uncomfortable chair. So at some point I may stand for a second, but hopefully I'll get through it. So I'm actually going to start out with a story. And it's a true story about my own shopping behavior. Many of my research ideas come from reading the literature, but also even more so from my own irrational behavior. So as someone who studies irrational decision-making, I give myself many ideas by behaving irrationally quite frequently. And I was shopping at a mall. The US has really big malls, but I know it's kind of a global phenomenon now, but malls, like stores everywhere. And I don't actually like shopping. So when I go shopping, I try to get a lot of shopping done. I had 2 credit cards with me. One of them gave money to the RSPCA, which is an organization that helps animals, particularly cats and dogs that are strays that need a home. And the other one was Save the Children, which of course helps children who are in need. And both credit cards gave the same percentage. It's 1% of however much you spend goes to this charity. So it's all great, right? And I care about both charities, but I have to admit, and this doesn't sound good, as somebody with 2 cats, I had a slight preference. I also Save the Children, stronger preference for the RSPCA. I don't always confess that. But I actually used both credit cards. And what I noticed is I'd go from store to store and I'd like save some animals, buy some shoes, right? And then go to the next store and think, oh, I need to buy toothpaste. And then I would be like, oh, I just saved animals. Now I'm going to save some kids. And I was basically seeking variety through my donations while I was at the mall. I kept flipping through the 2 cards. Well, if I care more about one cause, you'd think I just use one, right? And it's not like, just have to be clear, I wasn't spending thousands of dollars. Many of my purchases were less, almost all of them were actually less than $100. And I didn't, I didn't spend $1,000 that day. I might have spent $200 total. So it's not like I was giving so much money that I was solving, right? If I spent it all, if I gave it all to the animals, it's not like all the kittens would now have their own home or all the children would now be saved. These were small donations. And so afterwards I thought, this is really irrational that I'm flipping around, like I'm trying different flavors of ice cream. And that's where I got into this idea of, well, why do I have this preference for variety with charitable giving? And am I alone? Am I the irrational one in the story, or are there other people who behave this way like I do? And then I thought about some incidents that, these are old ones, but I get into more modern times where there was an event and there was a big request out, please give money because these people are in need. And then there was another event, but it was similar, and it got much less money. So very old, Hurricane Katrina, at this point, more than 15 years ago. It happened, it was all over the news, it was huge. But that right after that, there was another hurricane. It was much smaller, but the amount of donations was relative to the magnitude of the event and how many people were suffering. It was like if this was 100 times bigger, the donations were less than 1/10 of 1% as much. Like, it was drastic. It was like 1/10,000th as much or less was donated. And I thought, maybe it's just people are kind of tired. Like, well, I just gave to a hurricane in the US. I'm going to give to another hurricane in the US. Enough. And then, these are some old ones, but I've got some new ones too. There was an earthquake in Pakistan. People donated. But then there was a mudslide soon after in Latin America, and a lot of the people who donated got a call from the same organization, do you want to give? And it's not that they cared more about one place than the other. It was, oh, I already gave to some crisis far away. I don't want to give to another one. Pakistan and Latin America, not close, not the same religion, not the same place on the map, totally different. But people are like, a lot of Americans think the US and the rest of the world is like a category. And so in the US, there's just much less donations. And again, maybe Latin America is closer to people's heart, but they had just given to Pakistan, so enough, right? And then more recently, we had the big fires in Australia. I lived in Australia right before those fires for 2 years. I love Australia. I did make a donation. I was very sad, very moved. But a lot of people were moved who'd never been to Australia because of the wildlife, and it was just catastrophically sad. A lot of people made donations. Of course, Australia is not a very poor country, but those donations still mattered. Some people volunteered. Firefighters came from all over the world. And then there was also fires in Brazil. And some people were like, well, I just gave in Brazil to the Amazons, and now I'm going to give it to Australia. 2 different fires, but similar enough that donations could be affected. Or if you gave when there was a fire in the Amazon in 2019, would you give again in 2020? Or would you just say, I already gave there? So that's sort of what I was thinking about, right? There's all this stuff going on, opportunities to donate galore. And then, of course, COVID hit Brazil. Bigger than, it hit all of us, most of us. Not so much New Zealand, but much of the world, but Brazil hard. And then there was the second wave, and people already gave. We're like, well, I already gave, second wave. And then India, there's also a second wave, but I already gave to the second wave in Brazil. So now I'm getting to another second wave that's not in my country in COVID. So I'm just kind of looking at the numbers now. I don't have all the numbers because there's so many places to donate. But my hypothesis will be that if I'm able to aggregate it all, I'm going to talk about experiments here, but if I'm able to aggregate it, that there is some effect that once people give to something and soon after they have something that seems similar enough to them, it's COVID, it's not my backyard, they're like, I already helped some second wave people. So anyway, basically just paying attention to the data that I do have on real donations and my own crazy behavior, I came up with 2 hypotheses. And oops, my picture is literally blocking my text here, but if you have 2 donation opportunities and they're close in time, my first hypothesis is you're going to give less the second time because you already gave. I just gave enough. Similar to ice cream, right? If you eat a scoop of ice cream and then you eat another scoop of ice cream and then you eat another scoop of ice cream, at some point you're going to say, I don't want any more ice cream, especially not if it's the same flavor. I get sick of the same flavor of ice cream. Even if I love ice cream, I am sickly in love with dark chocolate. But at some point, often rather late in the game, I'm like, oh, enough chocolate. I don't want to eat chocolate. I need something else. I'll eat some pecans or something. And is charity like that? And my hypothesis is yes. And also that I can maybe get sick of chocolate ice cream and then move on to vanilla, and then I get sick of ice cream altogether. And similarly, maybe you would feel good about giving to charities that help animals. And then if you have the choice between helping animals again or helping children, you might switch to children. And after you've done animals and children, maybe you want to help do research, pay for research on breast cancer because they're different. And similar to, I just had chocolate ice cream, or we just went out for Chinese food yesterday. Let's do something different, even if I love Chinese food. So it's this idea that there's a satiation with charity, similar to eating, and actually not just eating, turns out music, think of all sorts of things. I love to hike. I have one hike that's my favorite hike. I'm very strange because I could go on that hike all the time. My friends are like, we did that hike last time. We got to do a different hike. But it's a nicer hike. And they go, who cares if it's nicer? We can't keep going the same hike. So whether it's hiking or traveling or music, or you don't watch your favorite movie only, you don't watch it 50 times in a month. If you do, that's really unusual, but you might like watching it after you didn't see it for 3 years or for a year or something. So this idea that time and similarity may affect our satiation with charity, just like it does with all sorts of hedonic things that we clearly do for fun. Travel, hiking, music, food, things that we just know are hedonic. And so in a sense, I'm going to be arguing about the hedonic dimensions of charitable giving here. But the giving to charity, oops, the slide is basically what I just said. It's like watching movies, like eating ice cream, like eating chocolate. If you get, you know, those boxes of chocolate that have some with nuts and some with cherries and some with coconut and some that are dark chocolate, milk chocolate, white chocolate. People like that variety, even if they don't like, even if the favorite is dark chocolate with pecans, they don't just want to eat a whole box of dark chocolate with pecans. They're like, oh, I'm going to have some, you know, milk chocolate with coconut. So we have it with chocolate. We have it with ice cream. With music, we have my favorite songs. I teach a course on happiness, and there's a song Happy that was very popular globally. And I played that like the second day, and then I played it. Someone said, can you play it again the third day? And the fourth day I was like, do you guys want to play this again? They go, no, enough. Play it at the end. Give us a break. So we played a different song about happiness. But even with music, restaurants, travel, what you order when you eat out, etc. Okay. And then I also thought of this as an American holiday, but there's an American holiday called Halloween, and kids trick or treat. And I know there are other places where they do it a little bit. I saw that there was some of it in Australia, but much less so. But kids go from door to door and ask for little pieces of candy, and people, they say trick or treat, and someone gives them candy. And kids come home, and I remember being one of those children, because I was raised in the US, with all this candy. And all the kids have a favorite. And I remember we used to get together, and my friends' children do this too today, and trade. So I might like Snickers, but the other kid might like Reese's, and I'll be like, okay, I'll give you my Reese's for your Snickers. But there would always be this hesitation. And I recently saw it a few Halloweens before COVID with a friend's daughter. She was like, well, I'm not going to give you all my Reese's because I like it a little bit. So I'll just trade some of them, right? So this idea that we want more of our favorite, but we don't want to just have a big bag of Snickers or a big bag of Reese's. We want more Reese's, but also some of the other things, like a little bit of this and a little bit of that, but a lot of our favorite, not just our favorite. So my hypothesis in a macro sense is that it's very similar when we're making donations to charity. Okay, and there are a couple things that I hypothesize have an effect here. One of them is budget. So just like, you know, I might like 2 scoops of chocolate ice cream, but if for some reason I agreed to eat 20 scoops of ice cream, which I would not do, but if I agreed to eat 20 scoops of ice cream, I would probably say, well, chocolate's my favorite, but I don't want 20 scoops of chocolate. So maybe 2 chocolate, 1 vanilla, 1 cherry, 1 pecan, maybe 4 chocolate, maybe a double chocolate. But I would mix it up if I was going to eat 20 scoops. And similarly, if people have a lot of money to give, unless there's some reason, breast cancer survivors tend to be very loyal to breast cancer. If you have an immediate family member, my mother's an ovarian cancer survivor. So if I'm given to cancer, it's ovarian, but I have multiple family members who've survived ovarian cancer, one who did not. So for me, that's my passion. But I still give to animals and, you know, and children and stuff like that too. But within cancer, I'm very loyal, right? So similarly, this idea that, well, whenever I'm getting 1 scoop, I get chocolate ice cream, or if I'm just going to have 1 piece of chocolate, it's going to be Snickers. But if I'm going to eat a bag of chocolate, I don't want just to be Snickers. My hypothesis is that's also true for how much money you're donating and how you're spreading it out. If I have $20 million and I'm going to be giving it to charity, I have to admit, if I got 20 million, I wouldn't give it all to charity. But let's say I decided I'm going to give 4 million to charity out of my 20 million lottery win. I wouldn't give it all to one charity. I would spread it out because somehow that feels better. Just like I don't want to be eating just chocolate ice cream. The other thing is timing. So there's a lot of research by quite a few people. I guess the seminal paper was by Itamar Simonson, I think from 1998, that if you have time breaks, right? If you're getting 1 scoop of ice cream every week, you're fine eating chocolate, because it's been a week. Or maybe you'll eat chocolate, vanilla. If you're sitting and having 20 scoops at once, you need more variety. So I would say that with charity as well, if you're just making a small donation every month, you don't mind it going to the same one. But if you're just donating once a year, and it's the same total amount, you might be feeling a need to spread it out. Just like when you're eating it all at once, you need more variety. So that's how often you donate. And the other thing is the similarity of the options. So when I'm giving to cancer research, I'm giving to one kind of cancer research. I totally care about breast cancer. I have a very good friend who's a breast cancer, actually multiple friends who are breast cancer survivors, but I know ovarian cancer gets much less donations relative to how many women die of ovarian cancer. And again, it's my family, right? My family, my mother's literally a survivor. It doesn't get any closer than that. So I'm more loyal there, but then I also give to animal organizations, wild animals, pet animals, and I also want to help children. So I give several organizations that help children. And then I also want to empower entrepreneurs in the third world who are in subsistence economies. So I give a little bit there. So I'm seeking this variety. And once I give to one that I've already given to wild animals, I'm not going to give to 3 different charities that help wild animals because those are similar. It's like chocolate, double chocolate, and another brand of chocolate. It's not giving me that same variety kick. Okay, so how is giving to charity like eating ice cream? I think I've pretty much said it. My hypothesis, and I'm going to show you some data, so it's not just things I predict, it's things that I've found, is that just like you might want vanilla, when you're eating a lot, you want variety, also with charity. And then I'm going to talk about some categories of charity. So just like there are similar flavors of ice cream, Dutch chocolate, chocolate caramel, chocolate with chocolate chips is different kinds of chocolate, different kinds of fruity, strawberry, burgundy, cherry, tart lemon, different kinds of nutty, butter pecan, pistachio, walnut. There are also charities that are similar. And these are just specific charities I used in my experiment that I'm about to describe. The World Wildlife Fund is similar to the Nature Conservancy and Sierra Club. If you're familiar with those charities, it's basically nature, animals, wildlife. That's a category I really love. So I have to admit, I've given to all 3 of those at different times, but always with a break in time. Charities that help children, there are many of them. Children International, Save the Children, Children's Literacy Fund, which is specifically about education for children, but they're not identical, but they're similar. And then charities that fight disease, American Cancer Society, American Diabetes Foundation, American Heart Association. These are all American because my data was collected in the US. So I just want to be really clear. Data was collected in the US. That's why I picked American charities. If I was in Denmark, I would pick charities that were based in Europe, in the EU, or in Denmark or in Scandinavia. This is not an American bias. It's just when you're dealing with American students, they're familiar with the American charities. So there were a couple tasks that I had my subjects do, and this is hypothetical, but I will say that I didn't bring this in because I want to have enough time for Q&A, but I have replicated these studies with money, and I get very similar results. So the phenomena I'm going to talk to you about in the lab, I also get with real money, where students get less money, but they actually have money, they allocate it. You're going to see the exact same pattern. Okay, so the first task is I tell them to imagine, because I don't have this kind of research budget that I can give them $300. So I tell them to imagine you have $300 and I'm giving you those charities. It's those 9 charities I mentioned. And you can give that $300 to a maximum of 3 charities. And then I give them examples. You could pick these 3 charities, or you could give it all to one charity, or you could give one charity 200 and one charity 100. But it's in units of 100. So you can't give 50 cents here and $1.50 there. So, you know, you've got this 300 to 1, 200, 100 to 2 charities, or 100, 100, 100, where 3 charities get it equally. And I also asked them to rank all the 9 charities in terms of which charities they would be most likely to give. That was the first task. So first they do the ranking, and then they do the allocation. And the ranking is which charity do you care most about and you'd be most willing to donate to. And they get the exact same list. So they rank first, and then they're asked to do a hypothetical donation of $300. And so the first question, do they just give to their favorite? So it makes sense. If your favorite is Sierra Club, it's $300. You're going to give it to Sierra Club. That makes sense, right? Because it's not so much money that you've solved that problem. But let me start with, you know, what were the initial results? So 64% of my subjects listed their 3 favorites in the same category. So more than half of them had 3 about nature, 3 about children, or 3 about cancer. Much more popular children and nature than cancer among undergraduates, probably because they're young. They don't know as many people who've survived cancer or worse, died from cancer. Both of those things trigger an increase in donations. But they tended to stick most of their, if they picked 3, Their favorite 3 were Sierra Club or Wildlife Fund, right? They were all in the same category. But only 17% put all their money in the same cause category. So literally, many of them violated their preferences for which charity they liked the most in the second task where they were allocating, which is weird, right? You're the same person. Did your preferences change in the last 30 seconds? No, but their ranking did not predict their allocation. What predicted it? Variety seeking between categories. That's what it was. 29%, only 29% gave to only their 3 favorites. So many of them literally had a charity that was their 3rd favorite or their 2nd favorite, and they didn't give to it. And instead they gave to another charity that wasn't even in their top 3, which is like, this one's more important. But it was always in that case, they were moving to a new category. So if their top 3 were the 3 for children, they would give to their favorite one, and then they would put the other 2 donations in the other 2 categories, even though their 2nd and 3rd favorite were in the same category. That was all of them who switched in that way. They switched to have variety between categories. And only, 29% gave to their favorite, and 6% gave all the money to the same charity, which is like nothing, right? And you'd think rationally it's $300, it's not that much money. If your favorite charity is Sierra Club, give it to Sierra Club. I also forgot to mention in the ranking, they were allowed to have ties. So they could say Sierra Club and World Wildlife Fund are tied for 1st place, and my 2nd favorite is Save the Children. So they could have ties, but most of them did not have ties for their favorite, and yet only 6% gave to their favorite, even if it was a clear, they only had one favorite, but that favorite didn't get all the money. So again, kind of irrational, but a lot like me with my credit cards floating around in the mall, switching from children to animals to children to animals. So it was very nice for me to know that I'm not the only crazy person when it comes to charitable giving, or irrational. It's not crazy, it's a little bit irrational. One of the things I did is afterwards, I asked them at the end of the questionnaire, would you volunteer to be interviewed to discuss your answers? And quite a few of them volunteered, which was nice. And so these are some of the answers I got from the volunteers. And I specifically called back and spoke to the ones who had violated their preferences. As it turned out, that was the majority of my subjects. So it was the participants in this research tended to violate their preferences very often. And so I would show it to them and say, well, you know, your 3 favorites were all in the same category, but when you had to allocate, you allocated to your favorite and then 2 others that weren't your 3 favorites that were in different categories. What's that about? And here's some of the answers they gave that I thought were very revealing. I want to help all the causes, literally, which is what I predicted, right? They want variety. I'm the type that wants to help everyone, not just one cause, even if it's my favorite. So it's like, I'm a good person. So one interesting thing is none of them said, except for one person said, this is irrational. And he was an econ major, he was a senior, but the rest of them were like, because I'm a good person. A bad person gives it all to one category. And I was like, but it's not bad. You're giving to charities. A bad person takes all the money and buys themselves, you know, fancy shoes, but you're still giving if you give to one charity. But no, there was this theme in some of the shares that I'm the type of person who wants to help everyone. Only giving to your favorite seems selfish to me, maybe even greedy. By the way, each of these quotes is somebody else. So you're hearing different words, but kind of the same themes, right? It seems selfish to give to your favorite charity. Really? But it's a charity, it's not going to you. It would be boring to just keep helping trees and not make a contribution to anything else. I love this quote because this person admitted that part of donations, it's not exactly entertaining, but it feels good to be. I'm imagining fuzzy animals purring, and I'm imagining children eating a good meal because of me, and then I'm imagining a tree being planted because of me, and then I'm imagining some researcher doing research to save lives because of me, and I'm helping the Brazilian rainforest in Australia, right? So there's this sense of it's more fun to imagine your money making a difference in different places. And then someone said you have to be open-minded. And I'm just like, violating your preferences is now open-minded. That's kind of cool. If you're an economist, you know, that's like, oh, I didn't think of that. And then there was the economist. So this is the last one. So he's a senior undergraduate. He wasn't like a professor of economics, but he said, that is weird. I think it just feels like I'm helping more if I spread it out. But yeah, I can see that doesn't make sense. So my economist could say, this is really silly. You're right. I didn't give to my favorites. I only give to my one favorite. But it shows that there's this sense of, even knowing that it's silly, he still can explain why he did it. And that relates to me too, because I get that it's irrational, but that doesn't mean I'm not going to do it. So the next question I had is, what about if we give them breaks between the donations? So these aren't real breaks. I'm not going to collect data and then a year later look for the same student subjects, because this was student subjects. Convenience sample, I know it's more ideal if we have a more representative of the world sample. So prior research has shown that variety seeking is less common when snack consumption episodes are separated by time. That's Itamar Simonson's 1999 paper. It's also been found, this kind of old research, but by work by Rebecca Ratner, Barbara Kahn, and Daniel Kahneman with music. So you might have a favorite song, but that's not the only song you play. You know, your iTunes isn't just your favorite song or your favorite 3 songs. A lot of us have lots of music we collect, and we collect all that music because it gets boring to just hear, "'Cause I'm happy," you know, enough already. I want to hear a different song or a different genre. So we asked when we gave them imaginary breaks. So we said, instead of imagining that you're spending this $300, imagine that for the next 3 years, you're going to spend $100 every year. Is that going to affect their donations? And we got slightly different answers. My prediction would be, I'm assuming you all would agree, that because there are lapses of time, there'll be less variety seeking. Just like if you're going out to eat only once a year, you might go to the same restaurant. But if you go out to eat every day, which none of us have been doing, at least where I am because of COVID, you're not going to go to the same restaurant every day and order the same entree every day. By the way, there's research by Jonathan Levav and Dan Ariely that shows that if in public, you're particularly going to seek variety, right? So if I'm going out to eat with a bunch of people and they're all ordering chicken, one is ordering chicken, one's ordering fish, I'm going to try to be different and order some other thing. And when I'm with other people, I'm also more likely to not order the same thing every time I go out, because people will say, "Michelle, you're so boring. Are you always going to order the salad? Is this with the salmon on the side? What is that?" So there's all sorts of things that affect it, but in general, breaks makes people seek less variety. And so indeed, we got less variety. It was exactly this. It was different subjects, so different students, but the same campus, the same population, recruited pretty much the same way. Just a slightly different question, but the same list of 9 charities in those 3 categories. When asked to list their favorites and given $300 to allocate among 3 charities, $100 segments, but over 3 years, we get a pretty big change. 62% listed their favorites in the same category compared to 64%. Actually, this is not the better slide. This is a better slide. So you see no change in the first line, which is absolutely what I would predict, because the first measure is what are your favorites, okay? And there's no reason the number of favorites you have in the same category would change as a function of whether it's year breaks or not. So I was happy with that, because what the first question shows, 62% and 64% are not significantly different. And what it shows is the other results I'm going to see in terms of differences in how they allocate the money are not based on differences in their preferences. Their preferences tend to be in the same category in both groups, but their variety seeking is reduced because they're thinking, well, it's okay to give to the same kind of charity every year. I'm just going to give them all the same charity at once. So big changes. So donated money placed in more than one cause category goes from 83% to 44%. Gave to their 3 favorite charities, 29% and 71%, right? So you're seeing a lot less variety seeking with the 1-year breaks. And one favorite charity got it all, only 6% in the first study, but in the second study, it was 46%, right? So that's a lot. What it says is, if I give you time, you're seeking less variety. Just like if I give you a scoop of ice cream every year versus, every year for 20 years versus 20 scoops at once, there's going to be more variety seeking if you're eating all the ice cream at once, or if you're donating all the charity to all the charities at once. So the effect of time and budget constraints on variety seeking, what I think I've identified is similar to sensory specific satiation, which is very, very robust, and research, just tons of research has been done that we do get sick of salty, we move on to sweet, etc., that there's cause specific satiation, and that favorite charities are like favorite flavors of ice cream. Overindulging in one can sort of make you lose the appeal of giving more to that one versus a different one. So chocolate, vanilla, strawberry, pralines and cream, children, animals, curing cancer, planting trees, that there's that kind of variety seeking. And just want to talk a little bit about implications, and what I can do is if there are a lot of questions on this half, I'll take those questions and then I'll move on to the other stuff, which is prospect theory based, which I think is even more cool, but maybe not quite as fun. So does not, minimizing risk does not explain it. So oftentimes we talk about variety seeking, for example, in investing. It makes sense, Max that brought up investing as well, but it makes sense when you're investing to diversify your portfolio. Don't put all your money in tech or in one stock, but diversify. But there's really no risk with the charitable giving. And also, even if you think one of the charities might be corrupt, it wouldn't make sense that because the charities that help animals, if this one is corrupt, would this one be corrupt? No, those are different charities. So it wouldn't explain why they're spreading it out between the categories, because there's no reason to believe that there would be a risk in terms of the charity not being credible just because it's from the same category as some other charity. And someone else said it's minimizing the effort of deciding, but it's actually the opposite. Because it's real easy to say, well, these are my 3 favorites. Next question, which 3 charities are you going to give? Those 3 favorites. That's the easier thing to do, to just repeat your answers. But they actually took some extra time and thought, oh, well, these are my 3 favorites, but they're all about children. I don't want to not help the animals. And oh yeah, diseases are important when old people die and stuff, so I'm going to spread it around. So that's not literally, that's not a transcript, but I'm kind of thinking of what their thoughts are. So it was actually more work to violate their preferences, and they still did it. And then, well, of course, as a behavioral economist, is this irrational? And I'm going to say not necessarily. If we accept, and this is something I could talk quite a bit about, I could do a whole speech on this. If we accept that giving feels good, and we give to help, but we also give because giving feels good. You know, if there is someone who needs help crossing the street, I help them because I want to help them. But I confess that when it's over, I feel good, and I feel good because it was me. If Gabriella helps him across the street, I'm happy she did that, but I don't feel as good as if I walked them across the street, because I want it to be me, and it doesn't matter which of you are helping them. I want to be the one helping them. So I just argue that it's okay. It's not pure altruism, right? Pure altruism is you just want the world to be a better place, but owning the deed and feeling good about it, I don't think that's bad. I don't think that's irrational. I think it's the reason we're not all free riders, thank the Lord. And I think giving because it feels good is okay. And if you're helping people, I think it doesn't matter to them if you're doing it because it feels good or because you're pure altruist. It just matters that people are doing the right thing. That matters the most, to me at least, as a marketer, and all that. Okay, so possible applications. So if we're a charity, by the way, I did this, I replicated this with quarters. There were literally cups with all those charities, and the students got a number of quarters. They didn't get $300 because that's not the kind of budget I had for research, but they got a roll of quarters. And you have no, it's so funny. They'd say, these 3 are my favorite, and they'd get a number of quarters, and they would, so common, the most, actually more variety seeking with real money, they would put a quarter in all 9 cups, and then they'd put extra quarters in their favorite. But nobody took all their quarters and put it in 1 cup. And I think the visual made it even, you know, it was like, they don't want an empty cup. So they were giving it to all of them. And this was real money that at the end, I rolled it up, counted it. And that's the check I wrote to the charity was based on the quarters. And they knew this was really going to happen. We still got the variety seeking of violating preferences. So what are the implications, right? Because in the real world, you want to know if you're a charity, what are the implications here? So perhaps charities should share mailing lists, right? I give to certain charities and they constantly write me, you know, if we share with people that have similar values, right? So I confess I'm a Democrat, but I'm not confessing that with shame, but I'm a Democrat in the US, and I therefore care more probably about the environment. So if the DNC could give my name to environmental charities and environmental charities could give my name to the DNC, I might be more inclined to give to the DNC today and then 3 days later give to Sierra Club than DNC, 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 or Sierra Club, Sierra Club, Sierra Club. So that's one suggestion. But then again, they should be different enough categories with same values. So similar values, you know, probably not a pro-life white supremacist group is not, my name's useless, no matter, you know, no matter what, it's going to be useless. I'm not giving. But I'm probably more likely to give to the DNC and then Sierra Club than the DNC and some other, you know, politically left-leaning organization that's similar to the DNC or that's specific for a specific candidate who happens to be a Democrat. Also, the timing of requests should be coordinated. And also people who are fundraising shouldn't bother you every day, because it actually made me give specifically with the Democratic National, for the Democratic Party, I gave less in the end because I was just so tired of them writing me every day. Didn't make me flip to Republicans, but it just made me think, like, enough. I gave, oh my God, I'm going to vote. Of course I'm going to vote. Okay. And then variety should be offered within a charity too. And this is done, so they don't really need Michelle to tell them this. But for some charities could do this, and there's been a huge increase in how many charities are doing it, where I might be one charity, but I give you a variety of ways that you can give. So perfect example, World Vision helps children, great cause. If I'm sponsoring Godfrey, he's male, he's in Uganda. Maybe it's not, I'm not inclined to sponsor 3 males in Uganda because I'm already sponsoring a male in Uganda. But here's Christine, and she's in Armenia. She's female. She's a different part of the world, different ethnicity. So that feels like variety, right? That feels like 2 scoops of different flavors. So that's one thing. And it's not just children, they're animal. This is a great one. Giving to best friends. They'll give you dogs that you can sponsor that are, shelter animals. And then they also have, as you can see here at the top, they also have cats, birds, bunnies, barnyard animals, wildlife. So you can sponsor a dog, and then you can sponsor a bird. And then instead of 2 birds and 3 dogs, you can also sponsor a cat or a rabbit, or a cat and a rabbit and a dog and a pig and a duck. You could sponsor a duck. You could also sponsor a goat if that's something you want to do. Goats are actually wonderful. They do a lot of good things, prevent fires, and all that. You could, or you might be inclined, because I used to eat chicken and now I stopped eating chicken, but I feel bad. So maybe I'd want to help a chicken or a rooster because I feel guilty about all that chicken I ate. Or a pig. I never actually ate pork, but pigs are cute and they're treated badly and they're very intelligent, though those are not the prettiest pictures. Or horses, just my point is there's variety. So you could keep giving to that organization, but still get your variety. You wouldn't have to flip to a new organization because you're satiated. You can also sponsor children in different ways. I really like this idea as well. So instead of going around the world and going from boys to girls, you can feed orphan girls, or you can sponsor their going to the dentist, because if you're poor, you can't afford dental care. Or you could sponsor a tutor to help them academically. Like sponsor a full wardrobe for the children. You could sponsor all the needs of an orphan girl for 1 month. So there's a variety of ways, and it's not the only one. There's a classroom one where you could sponsor chalk or books or better teachers or smaller classes. So you can help kids who are not wealthy get a better education in different ways. And you can also adopt also platypuses and lions, right? So there's a variety of animals. So there's just lots of ways that charities are allowing you to specify within the charity different kinds of ways you help, so that experientially you have this diversity without having to leave that organization and go give your money elsewhere. So if you guys have questions about that, I will take questions, and then I'll move on to tell you a little bit about something called take aversion that's based on prospect theory that has to do with endowing people with charity. But I see, oh gosh, can someone else tell me what the questions are?
Sure. So there's lots of questions that came in.
Great. I'll let you pick.
Yeah. Oh, it's even hard to pick. Okay, so
first come.
One question was, why is giving to multiple charities irrational? And what is your model of correct optimization?
So I think I kind of argue that it's not really irrational, but it's violating preferences. So you could say it's a bit of a preference reversal. So the way that it's potentially could be framed as irrational is if I believe that the very best charity is Sierra Club, for example, then I should just give to Sierra Club because I get the most utility out of giving $1 to the Sierra Club because I think they're the best charity. And yet if I got just $300, again, I'm not solving all the issues that Sierra Club is combating, and I give some of that to Sierra Club and some of that to Save the Children, I'm in effect taking $1 from a charity that I think is doing something more important and giving it to a charity that I think is less important. Of course, for other people, it could be the reverse. And so I'm violating my preferences. I later argue that it's not irrational because if it makes you feel good, maybe that's some of the reason we give. And we are all utility maximizers, according to much of economic thought. So it's not necessarily rational, but it's an inconsistency.
If I could just clarify the question, I was the one who asked the question. The model under which it's irrational, or which you wouldn't be optimizing, wouldn't that have to be one in which the person had a particular view on the benefit they were getting from giving was a function of the impact that the gift had?
Right.
I mean, wouldn't that be the model? And then I guess the argument would be that after giving, there's one charity that's going to have the greatest impact, or let's say that was you cared about the impact that was achieved through your gift. There's one charity that's going to have the greatest impact, and that's not going to presumably not going to change after my $200 donation. Right.
So I think you're right. It's about what your utility model is. If your utility model is just, the way I get value is giving to the charity that I think has the greatest impact, then it's irrational. And if part of your utility model, which I think is common, is that you want to feel like you're helping different causes in different ways, and it's not irrational. So it's really about your assumptions, right? You're an economist, right? So assumptions are core here. So it's a function of the assumptions you make. So I'm actually not disagreeing with you. I'm just saying.
Okay, I think we agree. So I'll let you move on. I'm sorry.
They're doing it because it feels good and it makes them happy, more than because they think this charity is more efficient, efficient than this one. If that makes sense. Next question.
All right, so there were a lot of similar questions. If someone feels their question was quite significantly different to that one that they also really can't wait for an answer, please raise your hand so we can identify you. And I'm going to ask a different question in the meantime. So my question is about a possible second mechanism that could also be involved, and I'm wondering what you think of this. Is it possible that we also have some sense of obligation to take care of more than one cause? So if I think about purely hedonic things, I don't feel bad that I can't try more than 10 types of ice cream per year. Like, I might just be satisfied with that because my variety seeking isn't larger, and I don't have regret that it's not larger or that I don't have more time and more money to eat more ice cream. But with charities, I always feel some kind of regret that I'm not able to give to more causes to help more people to help. So I wonder if it's this feeling that we need to give to all of them, like especially what you said about them wanting to fill all of the cups, that made me think of that.
Yeah, with filling the cups, it was really strong. Like it was so crazy. It was unbelievable. I was just like, did someone tell them what to do? And they're like, no, they just walked in and they wanted to fill all the cups. Like it's just like if you see a bunch of children and their hands are open and you have 10 $1 bills, you're not going to give $10 to the kid you think looks the hungriest or the cutest or the nice. You're going to give everyone some money, or maybe you don't believe in helping kids, but if you do, you're going to spread it out. So my next talk is about that because it's about how charity is different. So lovely little segue because my next talk is about that, because what happens with charity is guilt, right? So you said regret, but it's regret or guilt that when you pass somebody and you don't help them, that's the different metaphor from the charity. But certainly when you're passing people in the street, if you have a bunch of food and they're all hungry, you want to feed them all. It's funny, I'm visiting my family in Seattle and there's a pond near them. And I remember as a child, we did this too. We'd go feed the ducks, but we would obsessively want each of the ducks to have an equal amount of bread. We didn't say, oh, that's the pretty duck, let's feed him, right? We tended to feed the babies more. And if a duck looked a little, if there was a mama with babies, they get a little more, but we were obsessed with it. Like, oh, that duck is eating all the bread. This isn't right. So I think it's just a basic instinct that we want to spread it around, and that is not weird. I'm sure you're not alone. Probably everyone in the call is like, yeah, I would do that too. And that is about guilt, and that's what my second talk is. That somehow especially once we feel like we should be giving, then we feel we don't want to take away from anybody, God forbid, but we do want to spread it around. So I think that's about guilt, and it's completely an explanation. Absolutely. I agree. So it's not just hedonic and fun. There might be something happening with charity that doesn't happen with ice cream. And I thought you brilliantly said it. I'm also very strange. I'm embarrassed to say this. I guess I'm saying it and it's being recorded, but I'm capable of going to the same restaurant and ordering the same entree 5 days in a row if I like the entree. And I'm capable of going on the same hike and saying, you know, if I'm traveling around the world, I want to travel to different places because you learn something. So I'm like you, I'm more inclined to variety within charity. And I think it's because there's this extra thing that I just feel like, oh, but I care about animals too, but I care about children, but I want to plant trees. Oh, but that's important too. Oh my God, I really want to help. So and it's challenging. Because if you don't have millions, you can't give it to everybody. But I think that is emotional, and I think it's because there is some guilt associated with not giving to a worthy cause. I think that's part of it. And yeah, it's not just me who says guilt drives a lot of giving in charity. So
Great.
Are there any other questions, or should I zoom into the next one?
Yeah, I think David said, so it could have been a fairness norm. I think you would agree with that.
Yeah, fairness, absolutely. I think someone might have even said that. I may not have put that quote on the slide because I had tons of quotes, right?
Mm-hmm.
That might not have been in the slide, but I do remember one saying, if I give it to my favorite category, isn't that unfair? And I thought, well, rationally, no, but emotionally, yes, if that makes any sense at all. And just, you know, it feels, you go to sleep at night knowing, well, I helped a little bit of this and I helped a little bit of that. And I fed all the children on the block, or all the ducks in the pond, or all the charity categories on the list in the experiment. So I do think fairness could drive it, David. I think that's a great point. And at least one person, maybe more than one, but I do remember one person saying it's not fair to give it all to one charity, and very adamantly, like, of course I wouldn't do that. That'd be all to my favorites. That's so unfair. So yes, that is an explanation for at least some of the people. Absolutely.
All right, let's move on to the second part.
Okay, that was the end of that. Okay. And now I'm going to talk about how it's not like eating ice cream, and even not like consumption in general. All right. So not like having stuff. And I'm going to start with a story, because I often start with stories. Because again, I told you I often behave irrationally and then I get an idea. So this is a story of me going back to Berkeley after I graduated and had a job. And I went back to UC Berkeley to meet a good friend that I went to graduate school with for lunch at our favorite place, which is Cafe Intermezzo on Telegraph. So if anyone's been to Berkeley, on Telegraph, there was this big place. It burned down, now it reopened, called Cafe Intermezzo. They only take cash. David, I think you're a Berkeley grad. They only take cash. That's real important to know. At least back then, they only took cash. So I was meeting her, and on the way to meet her, I went to the cash machine to get cash because they didn't have any cash, and they don't take checks, they don't take credit cards, they don't take anything but cash. Okay, so I go in and I get my money, and I think I asked for 20. I looked in my purse and I only had like $1 or $2. That's not going to be enough for a salad. So I got a 20. That's the minimum that you can take out. And I walked down from the bank, from the little teller, towards the restaurant, which is further on Telegraph Avenue, which is a street that's kind of famous in Berkeley. And I'm walking towards my friend, and I see this panhandler. And I don't always give, because Berkeley has so many of them. Like when I first came to Berkeley, I was trying to give to everyone, and then I realized there's 50 of them on every block. I can't do this. So then my way of dealing it with, well, I just won't unless I see children or someone who, you know, looks young or really bad or whatever. So, you know, I had to create my own heuristic to survive graduate school at a ridiculously low income. But I passed this one, I was walking towards this one man, and what I saw that was so nice and very rare among the panhandlers on Telegraph was that people were not giving to him, and he was still saying, well, have a great day anyway, or well, thank you, I understand, have a great day, or God bless you. And, you know, many of them would just yell, you, and swear, you know, you horrible, and don't give me any money, I hope you die, you know, like horrible things. And this guy was the opposite. He was like blessing everyone and thanking them. And there also weren't like 50 of them. So I thought, well, I have a couple dollars, I'll just give him $1 or something, you know, and why not? Of course I'll do that. So I walked towards him and I reach into my purse to take out the $1. And actually now I remember I had only $1 and then I got the 20. So I had a 20 and a 1. So I reach in and think, well, of course I'm going to give him $1. And I hand him $1. Maybe I would have given him more if I had a little more, but I gave him the $1 because the 20 was for my going to lunch. I reached in for the $1 to put it in his hat. But instead I accidentally gave him the 20 and I didn't realize it until I gave it to him and I started to walk and I thought, oh gosh, I hope I gave him the 1 because I need the 20 for lunch. And I looked in and I was like, oh, I gave him the 20. He must really, of course he said, thank you so much. And I thought it was just $1. So I turn around, and this was a while back. I know $1 seems really cheap, but I turn around and he's smiling at me. And I think to myself, okay, now I have to run to the cash machine, get another 20, go meet my friend Denise. And when I got back I got back a little late and I explained to her, I was late because I saw this man and I really wanted to give him the $1, but I gave him the 20 and I wasn't going to take it back. And she goes, well, he sounds so nice. He probably would have given it back to you and you could have given him the 1 and then you would have given him $1. I gave him a 20. That's not normal for me, but yay me and yay him. And it's okay. But it's real important to say, I did not intend to give him a 20, but I was not about to take that back. And even if I was 100% sure that he'd say, oh, I totally understand. I thought you made a mistake. Sure, I'm grateful for the $1. Thank you, ma'am. He probably would have said it. He was not remotely scary. He was even nice to people who blew him off and ignored him. But I wasn't going to do that. And that's what made me think about this idea that endowing people with a donation, they don't want to let go of that. I'm not taking back that $20 bill. So this is something that there's just something about undoing a contribution, going back, even if the man was like, here, even if he had chased me and said, ma'am, you gave me a 20. This didn't happen. But if he had said, you gave me a 20, I don't think you meant to do that. And I was like, oh my God, you're right. I meant to give you $1. He'd go, well, let's trade back. I'm so sorry. If he had done that, which he didn't, I'm almost 100% sure that I would have said, no, keep the 20. I'm going to go back to the cash machine. Keep it. He would literally have to physically give me the 20 and run away because I just wasn't going to take $20 away from a nice man, even an accidental donation. So why did I not feel guilty about not giving him a 20 intentionally, but I would feel guilty about taking back my 20 and trading it for $1? There's something very different about undoing a contribution or gift versus not giving in the first place. That's my point. More guilt is generated when you undo giving, and we likely judge other people differently if they refuse to give as opposed to take back a donation, even an accidental one. By the way, that friend who met me for lunch, later on, she called me and said, I wouldn't have been able to take it back either. I realized that. And I also realized that if you told me you went and took the $20, I would have thought, well, it's totally justified, but that's not so nice, right? So generally, if we see someone not give an old man $20, we don't think they're a jerk. Or if they just give $1 and keep the 20, I don't think that person's bad. But if someone accidentally gave a 20 and said, excuse me, I didn't need to give that to you. Can I have it back? I would look at them and think, really? Do you really need that 20? I mean, are you hungry? Or do you think you're worse off than him? So it just changes things. And so it's another irrational Michelle story. Or whatever you want to call it. But I also want to say this is not just a Western phenomena. Taking from the needy is generally frowned upon with all religions, right? Regardless of it's Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, Judaism, Hindu, whatever it is, Baha'i. And that bad feeling does not seem to be dependent on how much is taken. A small undoing of a donation would also make me feel terrible. So if I accidentally put money in the wrong cap and it was a quarter, I wouldn't take a quarter back. I wouldn't take, if it was all my money and I needed it to live, I might say, oh my God, I didn't mean to donate my entire bank account. I need it for rent. But otherwise, if it's an amount I can live without, I'm not undoing it. And I don't think that's a cultural, someone had asked me that at a previous talk. Well, do you think that's cultural because you're from the West? And I'm like, no, not at all. I think that's in every culture, probably cultures we don't know about that don't have electricity and communication with the rest of the world. You're not supposed to take back a donation. That's just my instinct. So this goes to my little model, which is kind of a funny extension of prospect theory. I'm going to explain it quickly, and then I'm not going to talk about all of this, but I will talk about the part that I think is the most interesting. Some of this is outlined in a book chapter in a book. I can't remember the name of the book, but Chris Olivola And I think it was Chris Olivola. I can't remember the other person. I'm so embarrassed. It might have been Michael Norton wrote a book, and I had a book chapter where I talk about some of this, but not the part I'm presenting. So the part I'm presenting isn't anywhere yet. I need to work on that. But it's this idea that, of course, prospect theory, Kahneman and Tversky, 1979, the value function, that is the blue line you see. So that's the value function. Michelle did not have anything to do with that, even though I was lucky enough to work with Danny Kahneman as a doctoral student. But the idea of, there's many things about prospect theory, but the one I want to focus on today with the research I'm going to talk about is related to the story I told, and to some extent to Emily's experience when she was seeing the first set of studies. And that is the idea that loss aversion, that's the part of prospect theory that I'm going to talk about. Loss aversion is that losses loom larger than gains. So I don't know how many people in the room are not behavioral economists, but the idea is if you give me something, it has more value to me, and I'm willing to pay more to keep it than I'm willing to pay to get it if you didn't give it to me, right? That once we have something, it has greater value to us. Interestingly, my parents are currently moving from a big house to a small apartment. I'm visiting them to help them. That's not this setting. This setting is a virtual screen. This is in Chile somewhere. I'm not in Chile. But I'm helping them move. And there's all these things that I'm like, Mom, if this was on a table in the street, you would never take this. Like if it was free, if there was a box that said free, you would not take this. She goes, oh, but I can't give it up. And she's moving from a big place to a little place. And I relate to that too. I have things that I know I wouldn't buy or take for free, but because they're mine, oh, I have memories and no. So, you know, loss aversion is huge, lots of reasons for it, but I'm going to talk about something new, which I'm calling take aversion, right? So just like the more we get, the less marginal, diminishing marginal value, diminishing marginal utility, the less incremental value there is to having more. So if your salary is, you know, $20,000 a year and you get a $5,000 raise, that feels like a lot. If your salary is $100,000 a year and you get a $5,000 raise, that's still nice, but it's not that big of a deal. And if you're making $1 million a year and you get a $5,000 raise, that's nothing, right? So similarly, I have a bunch of studies that I'm not going to show. The more we give, the less marginal benefit we get from giving more, unless we figure out ways to increase that by things like variety seeking. But what I argue with loss aversion being a very strong phenomena with what we have is that take aversion with what we give is even stronger because there's a guilt dimension. So as much as I may not want to give away this water bottle that, oh, you can't see it because of the virtual screen, never mind. I have a water bottle and I would be very upset if I lost it, more so than, you know, the cost of it at this point. But undoing that charity was much more horrifying. That donation was much more horrifying to me. Going back to someone and getting back the money, even if he chased me with it, would feel worse than losing. And that's as a person who didn't even intend to give him $20. And that idea that losing is worse than losses loom larger than gains is written in prospect theory, 1979, long before I was in graduate school. But take aversion is my piece of it, which is that undoing a donation feels much, much worse than simply saying, no, I'm not going to give to that charity. And I'm going to show you some studies that reflect that. But I would argue why it's this green line, which is take aversion, it's literally just a straight down line. You can't even see it because it's over the black, is that I would feel terrible taking $1 away from this man, $20 away, $1,000 away. Just the idea of even taking a nickel away from somebody makes me feel terrible. If I committed to give to a donation to charity, I wouldn't say, well, I didn't commit to give very much, so I'm just going to undo that. I would just feel terrible. And I don't think that's a Michelle thing. I think that's a human thing. The guilt of not spreading it around, not putting money in all the cups, not helping the trees and the children and the, everybody else. Okay. So that bad feeling doesn't seem to be dependent on how much is taken. So here's the first study. It's super simple. It's between subject design. It's student subjects. I confess, convenient sample. But I have, whenever I present this, everyone's like, oh yeah, I believe that. That would be me too. And my audience has never been students. I guess once or twice it's been students, but usually it's, I've presented this even around non-academics and they're like, oh yeah, I believe that. I can understand that. So this is student subjects, but I suspect it's very robust. Okay, so one group of students comes in, they are undergraduates in psychology. They are agreeing to be part of this study. I used a mix of undergrads in psychology and undergrads in business, so not super diverse. American campuses, I confess. So they get one of three conditions. This is between subject design. One group, they're participating in this other study of mine. So they're answering questions and they're getting credit for their class. But I tell them, as a bonus, in addition to getting credit, I'm going to give you something else. And that something else varied by condition. So everyone had the same questionnaires because I needed data for something else anyway. But the ending of what they get varied by which group they were randomly assigned to, complete random assignment. So one group gets told, in addition to getting credit, you're also going to get $1. Okay, now $1 is not a lot of money, but they thought they were just going to get credit. And then someone says, you also get $1. So they're all, oh, I get $1 too, yay. Another group, by the way, the column on the right is the dependent variable. So I'm just telling you, the left is what I did and the right is the result. So the other group, and it was equal, it was like, you know, divided by 3. Another group got told that $1 is going to go to either the March of Dimes or the World Wildlife Fund, depending on the one, because I pre-tested and those were charities that students at this university liked, cared about, agreed with, were familiar with, etc. So a third of them were told that at the end, I am going to be giving money to either the World Wildlife Fund or March of Dimes, and that will be because you completed this questionnaire. So for every questionnaire that gets completed in this class, I'm going to be giving this $1. So they're like, oh, I'm getting credit, which I expected, and then as a bonus, I'm helping raise money for a good charity. Yay! So they were happy too. And then the last group, 1/3 of the subjects were told, and at the end of the study, you can choose. You can either give $1 to charity, one of these two charities, March of Dimes or World Wildlife Fund, or you can keep $1. So they're endowed with a choice, and they're happy too because they're like, I thought I was just going to get credit, right? So all of them are getting more than they expected because they were doing it to get some sort of participation credit in their class. But what you see is a huge change at the end of it all. I tell them this at the beginning, but at the end, I give everyone a choice. So everyone starts out in a different situation. One group thinks they're going to get money. One group thinks that money's going to go to charity because they completed this. One group believes they're going to get to choose between money and a donation. And at the end, all 3 groups are told, actually, you can choose. So the people who thought they were doing it for $1 get told, if you don't want the $1, we can donate it to charity. The group that initially thought it was going to charity are told, well, if you don't want to donate it instead, I won't donate it. But if you choose, I could just give you a $1 bill. You walk out and that money doesn't go to charity. And then the other group gets told you can choose. And what's super interesting is what a big difference, right? So the people who were endowed with $1, 23%, so less than a quarter, said, yeah, it's just $1, give it to charity or whatever. I want to give it to charity. I'm a good person, right? And they, you know, gave it to the charity. But 97%, and the sample size, I can't remember, it's like a few hundred, right? It's a couple hundred, maybe it's 250 or something. But the 97%, almost everybody who initially was told at the beginning of the study, oh, I'm going to give $1 to charity, they did not want that $1 bill. They wanted it to go to charity. They were like me. I'm not taking money from that person, right? I'm not taking it back. They felt like, no, I'm doing it for charity. I'm not going to take $1 and not have it go to charity. But the ones with the choice, they were a little more altruistic, but not much. Most of them kept the money. A little more than 1/3 gave it to charity. So what that says is this take aversion thing is really strong because you have a whole lot more people going from cash to a donation where people are willing up to give $1, but you have only 3% willing to undo a donation to get money. And that's take aversion. That's that, you know, I don't want to give up $1, but I'm certainly not going to give up that I'm giving money to charity. Oh my God, right? And this is in a population where most of them, because it's random assignment, aren't very altruistic. It's only 36% would choose charity. Okay, and I did it again with chocolate because someone said, well, loss aversion isn't really about money, it's about stuff. So I did it with chocolate. And then I have another study with keychains I didn't put up here. And we get the same thing. First of all, this has both measures, pre and post. So they're basically told in the first condition, it's another study, here it's either they get chocolate or they get charity, or they get to choose between chocolate and charity, but at the end they all get to choose between chocolate and charity. So the beginning, they all start out with, in the first condition, 100% of them start out with chocolate, and 58% of them keep it. But almost half of them give it to charity. So this is a nice altruistic group, really. But of the people who started out with charity, and then at the end, the second, at the very end, we're told, oh, but if you'd rather get a chocolate bar, I can give you a chocolate bar and the money won't go to charity. None of them would take a chocolate bar and take it away from charity. Because I think something about chocolate, it's such a luxury, right? No one can argue, well, I need the chocolate because I'm very poor. You don't need chocolate, it's a luxury. No one was willing to flip from giving it to charity to having a chocolate bar for themselves. And it was a nice Toblerone chocolate bar. And you can say, well, maybe they don't like chocolate, except here 58% of the same population did prefer chocolate over charity. So it's not that they don't like chocolate. This group wasn't more likely to be on a diet. They weren't different sizes or something. It was male, female, pretty equal in all the samples, not significantly different gender differences. Because at first I thought, well, maybe the females are more afraid of chocolate because they're more likely to be watching their weight, at least in the US. But of those who were endowed with a choice, initially 52%, they got to choose twice. 52% of them chose chocolate. But at the end, I said, if you change your mind, 44% of them chose chocolate. So even just thinking about it, some of them, this is interesting, nobody first said they wanted to give it to charity and change their mind at the end that they wanted chocolate. But some people started out saying, I'm going to take the chocolate bar. And then at the end, they said, no, I'm going to give it to charity, because they started to think about, wow, I could have helped a charity, but instead I'm eating a chocolate bar. It kind of takes the pleasure out of a chocolate bar. I mean, I don't think I'd enjoy that chocolate. Like, oh yeah, screw the poor children of Africa, I'm eating chocolate. That just feels awful. I will say that part of that might be that there was a children's charity, and just the idea that you're eating chocolate and children are not getting help is probably just a picture nobody wants to live with. But again, they like chocolate more than charity in general, just not if they were endowed with charity. So what I'd argue is take aversion is more than status quo here. The status quo bias would say you're not going to switch from money to charity, and you're not going to switch from charity to money. But if the status quo bias is the same for giving and for having, then there would be very similar. But what we see is there's way more flipping from chocolate or money to charity than from charity to chocolate or charity to money. And that's because what I'm arguing is take aversion. That's just something nobody really wants to live with, at least none of my subjects in the second study and very few in the first. However, in the endowment condition, switching from donating to cash chocolate was always less common than switching from cash to chocolate. Okay, I already just said that. Cash or chocolate to donating to charity. And this suggests that take aversion is even more powerful than mere status quo. The thing that I did was another study, there's quite a few studies here, and I feel bad because it's so late, but for you guys, especially in Europe. But the other one was I had them give choices of charities, right? So they got to choose between multiple charities. So the first condition, they start with money. The second condition, they start with a donation to either the March of Dimes or the World Wildlife Fund. The third condition, they start with a choice between the World Wildlife Fund and the March of Dimes. And then the fourth condition, they're given a choice between $1, the March of Dimes, and the World Wildlife Fund. So they have choices within charity. Real important. Again, 100% of the ones who were endowed with any kind of donation stuck to donation when they had the option to switch that to getting money. So same amount, $1 to charity, $1 to yourself. Those who were endowed with a donation, whether it was March of Dimes, whether it was charity, stuck to that. But what's interesting, those who were endowed with the choice between two charities, if they were endowed with a choice, it was kind of even how many chose March of Dimes and how many chose World Wildlife Fund. But if I endowed them with the World Wildlife Fund, hardly anyone switched to March of Dimes. And if I endowed them with March of Dimes, hardly anyone switched to World Wildlife Fund. There's no reason that these randomly assigned students in one group would be very loyal to World Wildlife Fund or be very loyal to March of Dimes in another one. But there was even an aversion, not just to going from charity to money, but to going from charity to charity. So that was sort of the second finding. I'm trying to go kind of fast. And what I would argue, which is an extension of Emily's question, which I did not plant it, but it was a lovely caveat. Oops, I cannot even see my title, that I wanted to look at guilt. So my argument was some kind of regret or guilt in this case. due to keeping the donation where it is, charity switching, and taking back. So this idea of guilt, what I did with the next study is I gave students, another group of students didn't participate in the study, a hypothetical and asked them how guilty they would feel with various options in the different conditions. So literally, this is a question that one group got. Imagine you were given a 20-minute survey and you were told, I changed the amount, but otherwise it's the same condition. Imagine you were given a 20-minute survey and you were told that for each survey completed, $5 will go to the March of Dimes. And at the end of the survey, you were given 3 options. You can either let $5 stay with March of Dimes, move that donation to the World Wildlife Fund, or take $5 for yourself. I just asked them, how guilty would you feel about each of these options? And it was a Likert scale, 0 to 7. 0 is not guilty at all. 7 is extremely guilty. Keeping it with the World Wildlife Fund, clearly there's someone there with a guilt complex, but the average score, someone who didn't put 0, one person put, a couple people put 1, because they feel guilty no matter what. But that makes sense because they weren't giving it to the World Wildlife Fund. So some guilt is there. But on average, it was 0.2. That's 0.2, not 2, on a 7-point scale for just keeping it with the World Wildlife Fund. For switching it, with March of Dimes, for switching it to the World Wildlife Fund, guilt was low, but it was significantly higher, 1.9. And then taking the money for yourself, 5.9 on a 7-point scale. So obviously some people just don't feel guilty. But my joke is the Jews and the Catholics always feel guilty, but because we're raised with that. But no data on religion. That's a joke. I have no idea what the ethnicity was. But so that's that condition. Then the other condition is, imagine you were endowed with the World Wildlife Fund. How guilty would you feel for each of these? And again, this isn't about World Wildlife Fund versus March of Dimes. They feel the least guilt keeping it with the same charity. So here, in the previous one, keeping it with March of Dimes was the lowest amount of guilt. But in the second one, keeping it with the World Wildlife Fund is the lowest amount of guilt. So this isn't about caring more about one charity or another. This is about sticking to the charity that you were endowed with versus switching to another charity. But again, very similar. The guilt is a little bit higher, but not very high for switching from one charity to the other. But taking the money, the charity, that guilt is very high, as one would predict. So the biggest guilt is not taking from one charity and giving to the other. The biggest guilt by far is taking from charity to your pocket, but still there's more more guilt associated with switching charities than keeping it with the same charity, regardless of the charity. But then what's also interesting is I asked them to imagine they started out being told that you're doing this 20-minute survey and you're getting $5. And then at the end of the 20-minute survey, you were told you were going to get $5. They tell you, well, if you want, you can give it to charity. They don't feel guilty about keeping it. It's 1.4. So when they were endowed with $5, they still feel a little more guilty keeping the money than giving it to charity, but very low guilt, 1.4. But if they thought they were doing it for charity, it's not a choice. They thought they were doing it for charity. I assigned them to that condition. The guilt was much higher. So it's literally going from 6.3 and 5.9 for the cash option to just 1.4. So again, more guilt with money than donation. But if you were endowed with money, that guilt's really small relative to if you were endowed with charity. So I'm going to say guilt ratings are higher for taking than for not giving. Guilt ratings with taking are highest for undoing a donation to take for oneself. However, switching charities led to slightly more guilt than sticking to the same charity. And then the question in terms of implications, because I'm trying to think of, oh, why would charities care? Is this just an academic thing? Is the donation contract. So I actually remember walking in the streets of San Francisco and a very young person coming up to me and showing me this kid, and it was a kid that needed to be sponsored. He said, yes, we're helping kids all over the world. This is a really good organization. And I said, you know something, let me just write you a check. And he goes, no, we won't take checks. And I'm like, well, no, you need to sign here that you're going to sponsor a kid and give money every month. And I go, well, I don't want to do that, but I'll just give you a check for $20. It's a good charity. I'm going to give you a check for $20. And they're like, no, we can't accept it. And I'm like, what? And he goes, no, we only accept contracts. And I'm like, what? He's like, but it's a good check. It's a good check. Like, I have ID. It's my checkbook. Look, I know it says my name's M-I-C-H-A-L, so I thought maybe he thinks it's someone else's checkbook that I stole because my name looks like Michael. And I'm like, no, it's McCall. And look, this is my ID and it's my picture. See, it's me. It's like, no, we're not taking your money. We only take contracts. And I thought, what's going on here? And then I remembered that when I got this result, because they want you to commit. Because once you commit to giving every month and you just think, well, after 3 months, I'll quit. You're going to quit your commitment to give money every month to a poor child. Oh my God, that's really hard to do. It's this thing where you can sponsor a child, and it's not just that one group. They strongly prefer you make a long-term commitment to give every month, because in a sense, you're undoing a donation if you stop giving every month. And that is a very powerful tool. It's a way of endowing people with future donations that they've committed to. And people don't want to undo a donation unless there's news that the charity is, the money is being spent on, the CEO's yacht or something, or that they're just not using the money right, or that child is actually a millionaire who was dressed up for a screenshot. You'd need a reason to stop. Otherwise, you just feel so guilty stopping. And it's not just, this sponsorship thing long-term is not just children. Again, those animals I showed you, that's a long-term commitment to a bunny or a cat or a dog. In this first half, I showed you that. You can also make a long-term commitment to helping schools. You can adopt an entire village, which is a bigger donation, so a lot more expensive. And you can agree to monthly make contributions to people in a poor village, and then they tell you about the village and what the situation is. And these are villages without electricity and water. It's not like a tourist village in, the Swiss Alps. It's a village that needs your help. You can make regular contributions to help trees, etc. Dogs and cats, I already showed this, but again, it's not just make a donation to Kenko or Herbie. You sponsor this dog, it's not just giving him $20. You're agreeing that you're going to send $10 to Herbie every month. If next month I say, yeah, I'm not going to give to Herbie, it's very different from my not giving to Herbie to begin with. Unless I'm starving to death, I'm not going to take it away from Herbie. And there's just all sorts of these. And you can even adopt bats and a duck. You can adopt a duck, and you can also adopt a duck pond. And what they do is every month, this is a kind of a nice, interesting one. Like when I saw this, I thought adopt a duck. It's literally called adopt a pothole. But why would anyone adopt a duck pond? They send you pictures every month of the duck pond and the ducks that have been born. And they show you pictures of the ducks, and they'll say, oh, this month, 7 ducklings were born. Oh, the 7 ducklings are doing very well. And now there's 7 more ducklings. And these ducklings are now teenagers. I'm going to keep giving to the duck pond. So I made a one-time donation to them, and then I just bolted. I did not want to be the guilt of the ducks and all the other animals. So I think, beyond charity, this idea of take aversion actually has a lot of evidence. That's the end of my experiment. End of my experiments. I've got some others, but this is the end of what I'm going to present. One thing is I was thinking about littering. So I lived in New Zealand for a year. I taught there for a year. It was wonderful. And there's something very strange happens in New Zealand that's very rare in the US, but I think is more common in Europe and probably in New Zealand and Australia than in the US. Every now and then I have a very good American friend who does this. I've traveled with him and it's exhausting. Picking up other people's litter. So I will not go with him anywhere littered, because he will just we're walking to the restaurant. He's like, oh, there's litter. Okay, I'm gonna go to my car and get a bag. And then he's like picking up all the litter, and it's like, we're late. I never litter, but I was not good enough to be picking up other people's litter until I lived somewhere with a beach, and I'd see litter on the beach. And then I became the litter girl. Like I would come with my bag and be, oh my God, who did this? And I would complain about it, but I would put it away, and I would go put it in the recycling. And if it was something that was cigarette butts, I would pick them up with this little clipper and put them in a bag and take them to the garbage. But I wasn't as good as others. But I think all of us sort of intuitively agree, even the wonderful people who regularly pick up litter, which I'm not, I only do it on beaches, I admit. It would feel so much worse to walk by someone else's litter and not pick it up. That wouldn't feel so bad. Sorry. What would feel much worse is to be like, oh, I don't see a garbage can anywhere. Yeah, and drop it. Like I couldn't live with myself doing it. And in a way, that's like doing harm, right? And taking away from a charity feels more like doing harm than refusing to do good. And littering feels like doing harm, and not picking up other people's dirt feels more like, well, it's not me, some other person did it. So that's kind of one intuition in terms of litter. And it's interesting because Max Bazerman brought this up as a reflection of my question, and I hadn't even thought that it's in my own talk. When do-gooders who've given to charity are found guilty of a crime, we don't see it as washing out or neutral. So Bernie Madoff, horrible criminal, right? Did horrible things. The fact that he also gave to charity doesn't matter. I mean, yay him, no. We still think he's terrible, right? And so if we hear someone is a criminal, or I work for Philip Morris and I sell cigarettes to children, oh, but I also give money to save the puppies. You're still a jerk. You shouldn't be doing that. Like, how do you don't get to wash your sins that are big by also giving a lot to charity. It's still good that you're giving, but don't refuse the donation, but it doesn't make you a good person. And, even giving it back doesn't seem to cancel out. So if you, stole something and then you came and gave it back, it's still not as good as you shouldn't have done that to begin with. And I also thought of Robin Hood. So Robin Hood, not a true story, I believe, but Robin Hood stole from the rich and gave to the poor. If he stole from the rich and gave to other rich, we would think he was terrible. Or if he stole from poor people in this neighborhood and gave it to poor people in his own neighborhood, we'd also think he was evil. The only reason Robin Hood was a hero is he stole from the very rich and gave to the very poor. And some people even think that was bad, right? So that's its own little, generally taking from one to give to the other is seen as bad, unless the other is much, much more in need. And the one you took from is Bernie Madoff, and then who cares? He deserves to be stolen from. And then this idea that it's a steep slope. Stealing is a sin no matter how much you steal, right? You can say, well, I only stole one small thing. People think that's terrible. I would still feel terrible if I stole one small thing, and undoing a small donation. And that's, again, why it's such a steep slope. And no one's ever says, the 10 Commandments don't say, do not steal, but if you steal, steal only a little. They say, do not steal, right? It's like, do not murder, do not steal. A little bit is still really terribly unforgivable. And I think undoing a donation is just something we feel is wrong, even if we also recycle and compost and give to other charities. And so, yeah, that's just basically that idea. Once you take, this is one other thing that I thought was interesting, the fourth comment, I won't go into the next one, but the fourth comment, I remember an interview. I listened to quite a few documentaries about bad people. And Bernie Madoff at some point was in an interview where he said, I felt really bad at first, and then I felt a little bad, and then I just got used to it. And then I remember another interview that was hitmen in the mafia who were, life sentence because they killed a lot of people. And many of them, they interviewed many of them, and the theme was sort of, wow, the first time I killed someone and did a job, right? This wasn't self-defense. This was, they were paid to kill someone, and they did. And they didn't necessarily, the person maybe owed their boss money, but this wasn't like self-defense. This guy walked in my house and started shooting at my family. This was like, I was paid to kill a man and I did it. I felt terrible, but then by the 10th one, it was my job and I had to earn a living, right? They got used to it. And so that steep slope kind of is backed up with this idea that once you do bad, you might adapt to it, and then you do bad again, right? Maybe if you keep littering, it starts to be your normal behavior. None of you, not me either. But that's one reason why I think it's just so important to say, do not do this, because once you do it, you might feel guilty, but the marginal guilt of doing it again may be very low relative to that first time. But it's interesting because the more you steal, the more you have. But if you don't feel more guilty, the more you steal, that might explain why some criminals start out feeling guilty, but then they keep doing it because they're enjoying that they're getting more and more and more and more, but they're not feeling more and more guilty. They're just feeling a little more guilty. Well, okay, I've already killed 12 people. This is the 13th, which is an extreme. That's the hitman. Or I've already embezzled, but I guess now I'm an embezzler, so I might as well embezzle some more, and then I can buy a yacht or something. So again, I don't have any data on the criminally terrible people, the horrible people, just interview stuff that I've watched in documentaries. But I think it suggests something. And then something I mentioned before is the crime is higher for stealing more in much of the world, I think in part because once you've stolen, you feel guilty. So then you might be driven to steal more and more and more. But if you know the crime is going to do more time, that might be what stops you from continuing. Because I think our emotional makeup is, once we've done something bad, I like to think I'm not one of those people, that the marginal guilt of doing it again might be much less than the first time around. And that's the end-ish, because I have some other stuff, but I'm also like aware that it's so late, and you guys are kind of, my organizers here, Gabriella and Emily, are stuck here, and they've been here all day. So I will take any questions. If anyone has questions, I'll stay until there's no more questions, and then I want to release Gabriella and Emily, who have been above and beyond hard workers. Does anyone have any questions?
So you can raise your hand if
there's like
you want to ask a question. I saw in the document there's a ton of stuff written, but it seems to be all written by David Weinstein. I think he had a lot of ideas, was super inspired, and also has some ideas about where this might go in the future that might be interesting for you. But
so
he had to go anyway, so you can't answer him now. So
well, I'm very grateful, obviously, to Emily and Gabriella, who have worked so hard all day, and I'm sure they're just thinking, oh gosh, I need a break. You guys have been awesome. And I have to say, I mean, you've been awesome in my session, obviously, but I've just watched you guys work so hard and diligently and be consistently helpful. And just the whole team has been great. So I definitely want to thank you for not only working hard, but working so many hours so hard, and you know, coming back for more. But if people have questions, they can email me. I have, you know, they can put it in the doc. Can Google me. I'm the only one with my name, except for one cousin who actually does charity work. It's so amazing. So my name is It's a very rare name. And then I have a cousin who does, you know, she was in Haiti during the earthquake, and she was in Myanmar, and now she's in Vietnam, and she does all this relief work. So I study it and she does it. So if you see someone who sounds like a superhero, that's my cousin. But if you look for a professor with my name, I'm the only one in the world. So I shouldn't be too hard to find, and people can reach out to me, and maybe I'll post my contact information in the doc as well.
Great, that would be great.
Thank you to everyone who stayed till the bitter, painful end, because I know it's been a long day for many. And again, I'm just really grateful. I've done a lot of conferences where I'm on my own and there is no Emily or Gabriella or anyone else. And so I'm like looking for the questions and worrying about the unmuting and then letting people in. And the fact that you guys took care of that made it so much easier and smoother for all the presenters, I'm sure, including me. So thank you so much for that. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks so much for this very interesting, well, it was two very interesting talks that go together. Very interesting talk session. So that was quite lovely.
Yeah, I hope I get to stay in touch with this community, because I think it's a really great group and it's such important topics. I also love the diversity. I loved hearing, you know, complicity and charitable giving are very different. And of course, following Max Bazerman, as I said, is like following Beyonce on the dance floor. I don't want to do that. But his research was so interesting in the talk before. You know, there's so many talks and they're all looking at different methodologies and different schools of thoughts and different aspects of well-doing. So I just think it's great to bring in so many diverse ideas and speakers and methods into one place. So I really applaud all the organizers and especially the team that's on all of these calls. So thank you again. I really appreciate it. And unless anyone has a question, I'm going to let you guys end it. So
all right, thanks so much.
Hopefully this is the end for you as well. So you can go rest a bit, but thank you again.
Yes, thank you. So have a good rest of your day, everyone, or a good evening. And